Now, let's discuss about the center-state legislative relationship. And in order to understand the center-state legislative relationship, you should travel across Part 11 of Indian Constitution. Part 11. As we have already seen that in Part 11 of Indian Constitution, Article 245 to Article 255, they are related to center-state legislative power division or center-state legislative relationship. Anyway, see, Chapter 1, especially Chapter 1 of Part 11 of Indian Constitution makes us know about the division of legislative powers. Means what is the extent of legislative powers being enjoyed by the center, as well as what is the extent of the legislative powers being enjoyed by the states. Anyway, see, have you heard about Schedule 7 of Indian Constitution? See, Schedule 7 of Indian Constitution makes a clear-cut division of legislative powers between the center and states by means of three different lists. Okay, means we find three different lists under Schedule 7. They are referred to as List 1, List 2 and List 3. List 1, that is first list, is called the Union List. Second list is called the State List. And third list, that is L3, is called the Concurrent List. The Concurrent List. Means these are the three different lists given under Schedule 7, which divides the legislative subjects between the center and states. Okay. Union List is also called as Central List. Anyway, and through the help of these three different lists, legislative subjects are divided. Anyway, see, those legislative subjects which are not divided via means of these three different lists, they are provided with a special name, and that name is called, the residuary powers. Means the residuary legislative powers, according to Article 248, they are assigned in favor of union, that is center. Okay. Under Article 248, it is given that the residuary powers would be vested with the center only. Okay. Apart from these residuary powers, the remaining legislative powers are divided across these three different lists between the center and state. Now, please try to examine the extent of legislative powers being enjoyed by the center, as well as the extent of legislative powers being enjoyed by the state. See, the subject matters given under the Union List, originally they used to be a total of 97. Means there were altogether 97 items under the Union List, but nowadays they have been increased to 100. Okay. The state list originally contains a total of 66 items, but at present they have been reduced to 61 items. there were a total of 47 items under the concurrent list in original, but now they have been increased to 52. Okay, means originally there used to be a total of 100 items under list 1, 66 items in list 2, 47 items in list 3. What is the present scenario? At present, there are a total of 100 items in favor of center, 61 legislative items in favor of state, and 52 legislative items in favor of both center and states. Concurrent list is basically a common list, means this is such type of list wherein the center and states both enjoy their legislative jurisdiction to make legislation or enactment over the items given here, over the subjects given here. But see, whatever the subject items or subject matters we find under the union list, they are subjected to exclusive legislative jurisdiction of the center. Okay. First thing which you need to remember, that over the subjects of union list, center enjoys legislative jurisdiction. Over the subjects of state list, states enjoy the legislative jurisdiction. And over the subjects of concurrent list, center and states both enjoy the legislative jurisdiction. This is the first thing which you need to know. The second thing you need to know is, whatever the legislative jurisdiction the center acquires over the subjects given under the union list, that legislative jurisdiction is termed as the exclusive legislative jurisdiction of the center. You know the meaning of exclusive legislative jurisdiction of the center? Here, exclusive legislative jurisdiction of center means by no way states are empowered to make any sort of legislation over the subjects given here. This is what meant by exclusive legislative jurisdiction. Okay. Second, whatever the subjects we find here under the state list, ordinarily they are subjected to legislative jurisdiction of states, no problem. But whatever the legislative jurisdiction the states have, that legislative jurisdiction is simply referred to as the ordinary legislative jurisdiction of the states, not the exclusive legislative jurisdiction. Ordinary legislative jurisdiction and not the exclusive legislative jurisdiction means to what? It means to say that there are certain peculiar circumstances or miscellaneous circumstances wherein the center might make legislation even over the subjects given under the state list. This is what meant by ordinary legislative jurisdiction of states over the subjects of list 2 given in 7th schedule. Don't you think one can easily make an assessment over the extent of legislative powers being enjoyed by center and states? Fine. The subjects given under the concurrent list. See, as the term concurrent itself suggests us that this list or the items given in list 3 invite the legislative jurisdiction of both the center and state. But what happens in case of commonness? You know what is meant by commonness here? Commonness means, suppose a particular subject, namely X is there, and this subject number X is basically the subject of concurrent list. As we know that over the subjects of concurrent list, both center and state can make legislation, because list 1 is all about the list of center, list 2 is all about the list of states, and list 3 is basically the list of center and states both. Okay, means both can make legislation over the subjects of concurrent list. Suppose in one hand the center moves ahead to make legislation over the subject X, and the legislation made by the center is suppose L1. Okay, at the same time, suppose state also moves on. Suppose a particular state moves on to make legislation over the same subject X, and the legislation made by state is L2. Don't you think here we obtain two legislation which have been made over the same subject X, now what will happen? See, here the legislation made by the center shall always prevail over the legislation made by the state. So, don't you think even over the subject of concurrent list, the center enjoys overriding legislative jurisdiction? So, after having a journey of all these three different lists, list 1, list 2 and list 3, what we got to know is the center enjoys overriding legislative powers under the Constitution of India. And this is simply because the prevalence of union type federal structure in India. Because wherever union type federal structure exists, it is obvious that the center would always enjoy greater autonomy, greater power as comparison to the units of federation, that is states. Okay, one thing more. See, the subjects given under the union list, don't you think they are numerically superior to the remaining list? Why? Because the maximum number of subject items are given here under list 1. Anyway, means central list or union list is numerically superior over the remaining list, and at the same time, whatever the subjects given here under the union list, they are qualitatively superior over the remaining list. Means list 1 is qualitatively and quantitatively superior to the remaining list. Means maximum number of subject items are given in list 1, and again the most qualitative subject items are given in list 1. And overall the most important point is whatever the subjects given here, they come under the complete legislative jurisdiction of center. Means only center is authorized to make legislation over the subjects of this list. This is how we can observe that what is the status of center when it comes to enjoy the legislative powers under the Indian Constitution. Anyway, now the subjects of state list. Ordinarily, states enjoy their jurisdiction to make legislation over the subjects given here, but that jurisdiction is ordinary in nature, not the exclusive one. I mean to say, still certain circumstances prevails, still certain miscellaneous situations are there during which the center is empowered to make legislation over the subject of state list. Now the question is, what are those miscellaneous circumstances? So in order to have a look upon the miscellaneous circumstances, within that the center can go ahead to make legislation over the subject of state list. The first and foremost miscellaneous circumstances is when it seems in the eyes of center that if a particular legislation being made over a subject of state list would be proved in greater national interest, the center can make legislation over the subject of state list. Means considering the greater national interest, the Constitution of India empowers the central authority or the union, or you can say the Parliament of India, to make legislation over the subjects of state list. For example, the provisions given under Article 249 of Indian Constitution. What is there under Article 249 of the Constitution? See, Article 249 says that if it seems to center that a particular legislation might be proved in greater national interest if it is made over a particular subject given under a state list, the center can do so. So, considering the national interest or greater national interest, Parliament is empowered to make legislation over the subject of a state list. But in order to make such legislation, some particular or a special kind of legislative business is to be performed. And what is that special kind of legislative business? See, the name given to central legislation under Indian Constitution is basically the Parliament of India. Parliament of India. And you must be knowing the fact that the Parliament of India comprises of two different houses, namely the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, along with the office of the President of India. Means Lok Sabha plus Rajya Sabha plus office of President of India, they constitute the Parliament of India. And in order to design a central legislation, or in order to give a shape to a particular legislation, that legislation needs to be rotated through all these three different tiers. Means if a legislation be initiated from the either house of the Parliament, or in certain circumstances we see that a particular legislation be initiated even from the office of the President of India. For example, suppose under Article 3, you must have studied that the Parliament can change the name, area or boundary of any state. And in order to observe such alteration, an ordinary bill needs to be passed by the Parliament, or you can say a simple legislation needs to be made by the Parliament. And in order to make such legislation, you can say the proceeding simply starts from the office of the President of India. In what manner? Means first of all, the said bill can be incorporated in the either house of the Parliament only after having the recommendation of the President of India. Means once it is recommended by the President of India that the said bill can be placed on the floor of the house or tabled on the floor of the house, then only it can be introduced in the either house. Either house means any of the houses. Anyway, so the legislative business just starts from here onwards. Again, in other circumstances we see that normally a legislative business starts either from the Lok Sabha or from the Rajya Sabha, means from the houses of the Parliament. Anyway, but if a legislation starts from Lok Sabha, it is obvious that it must be transmitted to Rajya Sabha, and once it is passed by Rajya Sabha, means the second house, finally it would have to be transmitted to the office of the President of India in order to face the assent of the President, right? So in this way we can see that any legislative business needs to move across all these three different tiers, namely Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and office of President. Okay, but here our concern is regarding that type of legislative business which is to be made over a subject given under the state list concerning the greater national interest or considering the greater national interest. So such enactment or the process of making such enactment shall be started from the upper house of the Parliament, that is the Rajya Sabha. Listen me again. What we were discussing is, if the center wishes to make the legislation or make an enactment over a subject given under the state list, the proceeding of that enactment shall be started from the upper house of the Parliament, that is the Rajya Sabha. And remember, that enactment is basically started in the form of a self-contained motion. self-contained motion is nothing but simply the resolution. Means a resolution seeking to formulate such enactment shall be tabled before the Rajya Sabha first. Okay. Once it is tabled before the Rajya Sabha, it shall have to be passed with the help of a special kind of majority, or you can say a 2/3 kind of majority, and that majority is basically a majority of not less than 2/3 of the total number of members present and taking part in voting. Okay. Means, first of all, a resolution is to be tabled on the floor of the Rajya Sabha. That resolution needs to be passed with the help of a majority of not less than 2/3 of the members of the Rajya Sabha present and taking part in voting over that resolution. Once it is passed in the Rajya Sabha, the resolution shall have to be transmitted to the other house, that is the Lok Sabha, and here the Lok Sabha simply affirms the resolution passed by the Rajya Sabha, and that affirmation be placed by a means of passing it with the help of simple majority. Okay, simple majority means a majority of more than 50% of total number of members present and voting. Once it is properly passed by these two houses of the parliament, the said resolution would be shifted to the office of the President of India, and once it is assented by the President of India, signed in by the President of India, it becomes law. Remember, such law shall be made enforceable only for a period of 1 year. Means the said legislation or said enactment shall enjoy the maximum validity of 1 year. But similar kind of legislation can be made by the parliament following the said procedure which we have discussed just now for any number of time. Means parliament can pass that law for any number of time, but each time it will enjoy the validity of not more than 1 year at a time. So this is how we saw that the parliament can make legislation or the center can make legislation over the subject of a state list considering the greater national interest. Means if it seems in the eyes of the center that when it goes on to make legislation over a particular subject item of a state list, that legislation would be proved highly beneficial in our national interest, the parliament can make legislation. In what manner the parliament would have to make legislation, we have just seen it, by following a particular procedure. And what is that particular procedure? First of all, a resolution seeking to that effect shall have to be introduced in the Rajya Sabha. That resolution needs to be passed in the Rajya Sabha with the help of a special kind of majority. And what's about a special kind of majority? A majority of not less than 2/3 of the total number of members present and voting. See, under Indian Constitution, 2/3 kind of majority is of 3 different types. Means there are 3 different types of 2/3 majority or special majority. First one is special majority under Article 249, which we have discussed just now. Second one is special majority under Article 61, which is basically employed in case of impeaching the President of India. And third one is special majority under Article 368. It is basically used to carry out constitutional amendments. Okay, so these are the 3 different kinds of special majority. Since our topic is not to have discussion upon different kinds of majority, so I have just made the reference of special majority given under Article 249. Okay, now leave special majority under Article 61, special majority under Article 368. This is not our business anyway. So what you need to remember in case of making such legislation that the majority employed in the Rajya Sabha to get the resolution passed is basically a special majority given under Article 249. And what is the meaning of a special majority given under Article 249? The special majority given under Article 249 is all about the majority of not less than 2/3 of the members present and voting. Okay, this is what given under Article 249. So don't you think Article 249 makes the mention of a miscellaneous provision, and following that miscellaneous provision, the center can make legislation over the subjects of state list. Okay, and it simply shows the overriding legislative jurisdiction of center. It simply shows, the extra legislative powers assigned in favor of center as comparison to states. Second reference you can make here according to the provision given under Article 250 of Indian Constitution. See, under Article 250, it is given that if the President of India proclaims national emergency under Article 352, the division of power which is taking place between the center and states stands suspended. Okay, and the center is empowered to make legislation even over the subjects given under the state list in order to, regulate the affairs of state. So don't you think, again, here center has been given the authority to make enactments over the state list. This is the reason why I told you that whatever the subjects given under the state list, they are not subjected to exclusive legislative jurisdiction of state. No, they are basically they are basically falling within the ambit of ordinary legislative jurisdiction of states. Means generally states enjoy the jurisdiction to make legislation over the subjects of a state list, but that jurisdiction is not the exclusive jurisdiction of states. Rather, they are the ordinary jurisdiction of states. Means center can make encroachment here. Anyway, Article 252. See, under Article 252, it is given that suppose there are two states and both the states are undergoing some sort of, contentious situations. Means there is some sort of, dispute prevailing between the given states, and in order to resolve that dispute, they are not agreeing upon a particular enactment made by the either state. For example, try to understand. Suppose S1 and S2, there are two different states, and both are confronting some sort of dispute. Fine. Suppose state 1 comes forward to make a legislation in order to resolve the dispute prevailing between the two, but the remedy provided in the form of enactment by state 1 is not acceptable to state 2, and hence vice versa. In that situation, don't you think the dispute would be continued? It would be difficult to resolve it. Meanwhile, both the states have decided to ask the center to make a legislation common to both the states, and that legislation would be no doubt acceptable to both the states because they themselves are asking the center to make an enactment. The center can make enactment over the subject of a state list. And remember, the irony behind this is that whatever the enactment made by the center, once it is made operational over both the states, and meanwhile these states again ask the center that please revoke the central legislation, we don't need it more, the appeal made by or the request made by these two states can't be made binding over the center. And the central legislation which has already been made operational over the states, that shall be continued till it is revoked by the center. Means whether to discontinue the law or continue the law, it simply depends upon the discretion of the center. The state's willingness or unwillingness cannot be made binding over the center. Don't you think it simply shows the supremacy of center over the state? It simply shows us the extent of overriding legislative jurisdiction being enjoyed by the center. One more example. The provision of Indian Constitution given under Article 253. Article 253 says that suppose the government of India goes into an international agreement or treaty, and in order to implement the conditions of that treaty, if it needs to make a legislation over a particular subject given under the state list, the center is empowered to make such legislation, no matter whether the states are in favor or in opposition. For example, let us consider that the government of India and the government of Bangladesh, they went into an international agreement or an international treaty. In order to implement one or more conditions of that treaty, suppose the central government has decided to make a legislation. But the point is, whatever the legislation which is to be made by the central authority, it largely going to impact the interest of the state of West Bengal. And meanwhile, Mamta Didi starts raising opposition over the stand of center that the state of West Bengal does not need such central legislation. The stand of Mamta Didi impact the stand of center. Without considering the consent of West Bengal, the Parliament of India can make legislation. That legislation would be implemented no matter whether it is impacting the interest of West Bengal or not. That legislation would be made operational, and the state would have to follow such legislation. See the extent of legislative power being enjoyed by the center. So don't you think Article 253 explicitly makes us know that the center has been given overriding legislative power as comparison to states. Article 31A, capital A. What is there under Article 31A? See, under the chapter of fundamental rights, you must have studied about the constitutional provision like Article 31A, 31B, 31C. They are basically the exceptions to fundamental rights. They are there to impose restrictions upon the fundamental rights. Means all the 6 kinds of fundamental rights you enjoy under Indian Constitution. Such provisions like Article 31A, 31B, 31C, they impose restrictions over your fundamental rights. Fundamental rights like right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to religious freedom, cultural and educational rights, right to constitutional remedy. These are the 6 fundamental rights. Okay. Anyway, what Article 31A says? Article 31A states that suppose a particular state government is willing to make a legislation in order to carry out agrarian reforms. But the point is, when that legislation related to carrying out agrarian reforms is made operational, it will violate your fundamental rights given under Article 14 and 19. And it is obvious that no legislation or no enactment can challenge the fundamental rights. You might have studied under Article 13 in Part 3 of Indian Constitution. Neither the pre-constitutional laws nor the post-constitutional laws can carry out what? Inconsistency with the fundamental rights, or if they are inconsistent to fundamental rights, they shall be declared unconstitutional up to the extent of such inconsistency. This is what given under Article 13, right? Anyway, so if it seems to state that such legislation targeted to carrying out agrarian reforms would violate the individual's fundamental right of equality before law and equal protection of law given under Article 14, as well as the different sets of democratic rights given under Article 19, it is obvious that the said legislation would be declared unconstitutional and void. But Article 31A makes the provision for what? Immunity against the fundamental rights given under Articles 14 and 19. I mean to say, Article 31 states that when a state government or a state legislature makes a law in order to carry out agrarian reforms in its territory, but it was known to state legislature that when the state legislation is being implemented or would be implemented, it would certainly violate the fundamental rights of individuals, more precisely the fundamental rights given under Article 14 and 19. Even though that law can be implemented as per the provision of Article 31A, because 31A makes the provision for providing immunity to state legislation against Article 14 and 19. But remember, that immunity to the law concerned or enactment concerned can be given only when the legislation passed by the state legislature shall be, affirmed by the President of India. See, here is state legislature. It has passed an enactment or law, and that law has been passed in order to carry out agrarian reforms. It is also evident that when this law is made operational, when this law is implemented, it will hamper the individual's fundamental rights under Article 14 and 19. Still, it is the demand of the time that the law shall be made operational. So, it can be made operational only and only when it is provided with some sort of immunity against Article 14 and 19. Now the question is, how the immunity shall be provided to such legislation? Article 31A makes the provision of providing the immunity to such legislation against Article 14 and 19. And it states that if the legislation be properly passed by the state legislature, state legislature means if there is a provision of unicameral legislature, then legislative assembly. If there is a provision of bicameral legislature, then state legislative assembly as well as state legislative council both. Anyway, once it is passed by the state legislature, it shall be reserved by the governor for the consideration of the President of India. Once the President of India provides his assent over the legislation that yes, you can implement such law, no problem, it would be made operational even though it violates the fundamental rights given under Article 14 and 19, no problem. Then the law would be given immunity. Then the law would be given or provided immunity against Article 14 and 19. See, such legislation can also be made operational even with fetching the consent of governor. But the problem is, after fetching the consent of governor only and not the consent of president or not the approval of president, if the law is made operational, it won't be allowed to enjoy immunity against Article 14 and 19. When it seems that it is violating the individual's fundamental right given under Article 14 and 19, it can be declared unconstitutional. But once it is assented by the President of India, and after facing the assent of the President, in due course of its operability, if it violates the fundamental rights under Article 14 and 19, no problem, it can do so. Even after violating or challenging the fundamental rights given under Article 14 and 19, it would be, remain operational. It cannot be withdrawn. So this is how the provision of providing immunity to a law against Article 14 and 19 has been made under Article 31A. Article 31A was inserted in the Constitution of India by First Constitutional Amendment Act 1951. Okay. One thing more. Article 31B. See, Article 31B was also inserted under the Constitution of India via means of First Constitutional Amendment Act of 1951. And Article 31B is nothing but simply an explanation to Schedule 9 of Indian Constitution. You know what is given under Schedule 9 of Indian Constitution? Schedule 9 makes the provision, for the validation of certain acts, certain laws. Anyway, Article 31B says that if a legislation passed by the state legislative authority is put under Schedule 9 of Indian Constitution, it would be made free from judicial scrutiny. So once a law has been inserted under Schedule 9 of Indian Constitution, no judicial scrutiny can be carried out over such legislation. But the point is, in order to put a legislation in the 9th schedule, it is imperative to face the consent of the center, to face the assent of the president. For example, suppose a particular legislative assembly has passed a resolution and it is willing to get that legislation inserted in 9th schedule. It cannot do so by its own. In order to get that legislation inserted in 9th schedule, it is imperative to face the consent of the parliament. So again, it simply shows the central dominance over the state legislative authority. Fine. The provision of Indian Constitution given under Article 200. See, under Article 200, it is given that the governor of a state can reserve all kinds of bills, including the money we live in, for the assent of the president. Means the governor has the power to reserve the bills passed by the state legislature. Here bills includes even the money bills as well. All kinds of bill, including the money bills, for the consent of the president. And without receiving the consent of the president, that bill cannot be given the shape of law. That bill cannot be transformed into the form of enactment. See how the center, shows its dominance over the legislative powers of state. Next point, please. The provision of Indian Constitution given under Article 288 Clause 2. What is there under Article 288 Clause 2? Suppose the central authority is working within the territory of a state. For example, suppose the center is indulged or involved in electricity generation. Means, for example, suppose hydroelectric power generation. In that situation, the center will, store water. It will make dams. Once the electricity is generated, it will distribute the electricity generated across the different regions. In that situation, the Constitution of India provides the power to state legislature to impose taxation over the central authority working within the state territory by law. Means state can impose taxation over the central authority working within its territory by passing a law. Remember, such law can be put into practice only after the consent of the center. Means said enactment cannot be passed without the willingness of the center. Again, it shows the center's dominance over the state authority. Article 304, Clause B. Here states are empowered to regulate the interstate trade and commerce. But in order to regulate the interstate trade and commerce, the state would have to make a legislation. And again, that legislation cannot be made without the consent of center. So, up till now, whatever we discussed under the legislative head, I mean to say, whatever we discussed the legislative relationship between the center and state, don't you think we can easily analyze that the center is provided greater legislative power under the Constitution of India? And in what manners the center is provided greater legislative power? We have seen through the help of different constitutional provisions, different examples. Okay. Now, let's switch over upon the two important doctrines which I have given you in the form of two distinct facets. First one is the doctrine of teeth and substance, and second one is the doctrine of colorable legislation. The doctrine of teeth and substance and the doctrine of colorable legislation. Once the discussion over these two doctrines will be accomplished, our legislative relationship, I mean the center state legislative relationship would be finished, and accordingly we would shift upon the executive relationship of center and states, or you can say the administrative relationship of the center and states.